Hello everyone, this is my reaction to last week's Star Citizen Live Tech Talk with Benoît Beauséjour.
Let's put the story of server meshing, let's put a button on the story of server meshing.
Sure.
And I'll break it down into 4 sections. How's it gone?
It has given us just good foundation for what we had to do last year in terms of the content drive that we've pushed forward, the performance improvements that we wanted to deploy. It was like, we were expecting a lot more turbulence with the release of server meshing than we've had in a year. It's been a very, very stable system overall.
Server meshing has been working pretty much flawlessly at scale for the past 9 months.
Server meshing might be a fantastic tech and it might work well on the back-end systems, but so far server meshing hasn't improved the gameplay experience, not at all. Only thing that server meshing really brought for us is a much higher player cap, around 600 players now. Server meshing was also supposed to fix performance issues, interaction delays and do-things, and this has not happened yet. In 4.5 we got engineering, and now CRG servers have to keep track, have to store, have to distribute even more data, and the game is almost unplayable at times with massive do-things. This is our Star Citizen, the White Knight Star Citizen. 4.6 server performance during combat. Late at 4.6 launch and combat missions were impossible. NPC ships constantly teleporting and 90% of my shots completely ineffective. Yep, the teleporting has been constant since 4.6, every single mission, all the time, no matter what. Had it in 4.5 also a lot. In patch 4.6 I had about 5 gameplay sessions and every time there were issues with enemy ships desync. Server meshing seems to be a fantastic tech, but so far it didn't bring us anything, Benoît, except a higher player cap. So don't make it look like it's a huge success.
And so I would say, like, if I look back at the year, obviously there's always problems, with new technologies, but the server meshing itself has been very, very, very solid for us.
Again, Benoît, you're talking about server meshing has been very solid for you. Yeah, but what does this mean for the player? It means nothing for the player because we still have terrible performance, terrible interaction delays and terrible do-things. It's so bad you cannot do any serious space fighting at times. You're talking like a man who's falling out of a skyscraper and he's passing floor 10 and he says to himself, hey, so far everything worked fine.
So what are some of the benefits that we can draw a direct line from server meshing that we've experienced in the last year?
A server crashing, that was the end of your session, right? You would lose your ship, you would lose your cargo, everything would disappear. You'd have to reconnect, restart the client, start over.
Benoît, this is false. We had server recovery long before we got server meshing. Of course, it didn't always work well, but it still does not always work well right now.
The key bit it brought us also is much larger player counts. And so we used to be limited to 100 players per server, which had the whole universe to simulate. Now we've got a series of servers simulating the universe. And so we oscillate between caps of 600, 700, 800. We're still experimenting going higher with this.
Yes, with server meshing we have a much higher player cap, around 600 at the moment, and CRG wants to go higher. But again, of what use is this if we still have massive interaction delays and massive do-things? We even have do-things of players and NPCs at walking speeds. Players, NPCs and their ships are teleporting all over your screen.
There was a 400-player party in one of the bars on New Babbage, and we looked at the server performance through that, and it was actually very, very decent. And so we expected a full meltdown, but it was actually good.
Think, Benoît, why was the performance good with 400 players in a bar on New Babbage? Did those players fly at speeds of several hundred meters per second? Did those players try to dodge incoming fire? Did those players use their guns? Did those players fire missiles? No, of course not. They were just standing or sitting in a bar. Congratulations, you had 400 players sitting or standing in a bar, doing mostly nothing and performance was good. I'm willing to bet there were still a lot of do-things and players were teleporting all over the place.
Other things that meshing has brought us this year is 2 new solar systems.
Yep.
And so for years we'd been stuck in Stanton.
2 new star systems, let's see. According to Chris, 2016 SysMcon talk, you are supposed to get multiple new star systems at the beginning of 2018.
There we go. And then finally, 4.0. So this is that'll be the first time we'll go beyond Stanton to other star systems. I'm not going to say how many star systems yet.
This means Pyro was 7 years too late. And we have Nux, but CRG just reused the old Lesky. They just made a few changes, for example, putting in a clinic and changing the outdoors. And we don't even have one planet yet in Nux. CRG is telling us for at least 8 years, now that we have the new planet tech, we can make planets and moons so much quicker. Yeah, we see nothing of this.
There's one more thing that server meshing brought us that's not negligible, is a very substantial gain of performance on the game server in general.
And here's where the gaslighting starts, I guess. Benoît, what are you talking about? Are you even playing your own game? You might see an increase in performance in your internal statistics, but players see nothing of this. We have massive interaction layers, we have massive TOSHIBA. The game is unplayable at times.
So that's static server meshing. We know the next big stage of server meshing is dynamic. What can you tell us, if anything, about that?
Currently, we're working on quasi-dynamic server meshing, which is we're trying to iterate on the static mesh, right, to bring it so that if an area is empty, right, and nobody's there, we can spin down a server, and if people go to that area, we can spin up a server. To achieve all this, all of the mechanics required for a full dynamic mesh need to be there. So like mass authority transfer between servers, because when a server goes out and it has X amount of entities that it currently has authority over, it needs to give that to another one, and that obviously you don't want that process to lock up the parent server. So that whole mechanism is what we're working on at the moment. In fact, we've done over the break. The team has actually reached a milestone. We were able to run with our internal testers a test of quasi-dynamic server meshing internally. So that's good. I mean, it's the first test, so, it's a bit rough, but it basically requested, I think, 200 servers to run the mesh. That was a little bit of a but yeah, our ops teams, Ahmed specifically, I got a call from Ahmed immediately. But anyway.
Yes, Benoît knows that 200 servers for, let's say, 600 players would be financial suicide. But how many servers does CRG want to employ? Is it one server for 50 players, for 20 players, for 10 players? And is this financial viable?
Obviously, the goal with the dynamic mesh, just to recap it, is that instead of having a subdivision that we pre-make in advance, like currently, every patch we look at the territory assignment, is what we call it, of like what's coming, like, oh, we have an event at this place, and most players are going to go to this system, and so we adjust the mesh, right? And sometimes we get it wrong, and it's a very manually intensive process, and we don't want to keep doing that. So the goal with the dynamic mesh is to be able to just adapt to where the players are, the cost of the location they're in, to be able to provision compute dynamically up and down. So there's also the unfortunate cost equation in this, right? The current static mesh will always provision a server for every territory that's configured. And so there's a little bit of savings we can go and get there. But more importantly, the dynamic aspect of it is to be able to always make sure that the proper compute is available for players when they're in an area doing something.
I would very much love to have this dynamic server meshing, and servers are coming online or getting distributed wherever they are needed. However, there's still issues with this. You have to distribute a lot of data between the servers and the replication layers in case one server goes down or in case suddenly there's a lot of traffic on another server. So I'm not so sure if this really works with acceptable interaction layers and TOSHIBA. And this costs money because you will need more servers. Right now, CRG is using AWS, Amazon Web Services. Maybe they want to use their own servers in the future.
Last year was coined as the year of playability. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've just backdoored a whole bunch of playability improvements that server meshing, which dropped last year, enabled. So we've had all of those improvements last year that made the game far more playable than it was in any previous year.
Again, massive gaslighting. Why are you doing this, Jared? 2025 was a year of playability, but we saw nothing of this. We still have massive interaction layers, massive things. Elevators, freight elevators, cargo elevators still don't work reliably. etc. is still a mess. But you are telling us last year made the game far more playable. Come on, Jared, please stop this.
Well, so I think that, obviously coming from the server meshing improvements, there was also some failings at the beginning of the year where we saw, transit became a very big problem. That's an example of a
Only
system.
because we tried to use it.
Does this mean, Jared, we are not supposed to use the mechanics? In 2025, we got missions like, for example, Resource Drive, which were a total catastrophe. Freight elevators were broken all over the maps. And now you're telling us we shouldn't use freight elevators for an event that requires to use freight elevators. 10 out of 10, Jared.
Well, they got volunteered.
Voluntold,
yes, exactly. To come and give a bit of oversight on this, to look at the system to see, okay, what do we need to actually, have stable elevators and trains and, make sure that that's always available. Because the traversal of the game, if that doesn't work, then the game doesn't work at all, right? If you can't take an elevator to get out of the habs, then,
you've got 20.
good luck, right? So the Transit Heroes team, I think, has done a fantastic job. They haven't re-engineered the system in that strike team, but they really focused on self-healing strategies, right? If a manager loses a carriage for some reason, for any reason, well, just create another one and get this thing rolling, right? Now, they couldn't fix, in this effort, they couldn't rebuild the system. There was fundamental flaws in how it was engineered for server meshing support. And so, but at least they got it into working condition. So I do think, like, if you look at the game now, transit is no longer the big problem it used to be.
Take note, CHG applied some self-healing mechanics, but the transport system, elevators, ship elevators, cargo elevators, etc., metro, has not been rewritten yet. But CHG has to write this completely new to be compatible with server meshing. But in his letter from Sherman, December 2025, Chris wrote, and while there were a few hiccups with some legacy systems, like elevators and air traffic control, that were built long before server meshing was conceived, server meshing has been working flawlessly since the beginning, a testament to the design and execution of the system by our network, backend, engine, and gameplay teams. There were. No, Chris, those issues are still in the game right now. Elevators, ship elevators, cargo elevators, etc., metros are still not working reliably. Benoît said very clearly the transportation code has not been written new yet. Chris, please stop telling us things that are not true.
25 now, spawn any hangar is there. So if your hangar is available, you spawn directly there. That's actually a very large quality of life improvement. I play the game a lot. It's, not having to go to the habs is fantastic.
Benoît, February 2026, I play the game a lot. Benoît, if you play the game a lot, why are you telling us that it works so nicely? The transportation system is so much better now, that we had so much quality of life improvements in 2025, and that 2025 was a year of playability. Either you do not play the game, or you are not telling the truth.
I don't know which is worse.
Freight elevator, ongoing.
There were. No, Chris, those issues are still in the game right now.
Previously, we used to just assign tickets to people and they would, find the fastest way to solve it. And now we're kind of work as a team with the teams in quality assurance that are basically the arbinger. Like, no, it's not fixed. I can still repro, right? And these guys have been going through a systematic approach for it. I think that's paid off a bit,
I have to admit, CHG is really, really good at this. Now that we have the new team, now that we have the new structures, now that we have the new tools, now that we have the new planet tech, we can be so much quicker. Yeah, we see nothing of this in the game, Benoît.
Heard talk about there being a tech preview of it soon. Talk to me about the transport system.
Well, so transit was problematic, wasn't designed for server meshing. And so transport is a complete rebuild of the transit system, but using more server meshing native approaches for how different pieces are going to manage elements that are streamed out and streamed in. We're also moving away from some previous misconceptions that were put into the transit system. For example, one of them was responsible for trains going into space. We don't want trains to go into space. So
You might not.
I make this short here. The transport system, elevators, ship elevators, cargo elevators, metros, etc. has not been written new yet, but CIG has to write it so that it's compatible with server meshing. Yeah, Chris, there were a few issues.
So what? What are we talking about?
So
Elevators.
transit and transport manage elevators, in-ship elevators, trains, anything that has to move when you press a button and you call it. So it's a network of carriage, peripheral, and gateway.
Speaking of item recovery,
Yeah.
we launched V0 or V1 or whatever the heck we called it, T0. I'm hearing that there's a T1 on the horizon.
Correct.
Talk to me about it.
Item recovery is a rework of the entitlement system. It touches on how you claim insurance on ships. It allows snapshotting of ships, but also FPS items, so that these live with an insurance loadout that we can keep and recover, and then will give us the ability to recover or claim your even FPS items. So think of it as an insurance system for FPS items. Right?
Interesting. I'm saying this for many, many years by now. Why can't we claim our items like we can claim our ships? And now it seems to be CIG's plan for item recovery 1.0. Of course, this has nothing to do with me saying this in my videos for years.
When you say people will no longer lose ships, you're talking about that whenever a patch comes out, people come in and they're talking about the ships that they've earned in game, the ships they've either bought with AUEC or stolen or whatnot. Those should persist.
If you have an entitlement for something, we no longer wipe that between patches at all. We keep it completely.
I hate the Rock DS.
It's comfy though. It's got to get.
Hold on, let's just do everything the first Rock does, but require two people.
Wow, I'm agreeing with Jared on something. Rock DS totally sucks. It is not like that you need two people to do the same thing a Rock can do. Rock DS has a better laser, I think, and more cargo capacity. Still, it's such a silly vehicle, and the mining laser operator on Rock DS sits outside without any protection, not against explosions of rocks, not against the elements. Rock DS is a total meme vehicle.
You know, I think your character at the moment has like 800 serialized variables on it or something like that, right? So those are all different components. Are you crouched? Are you standing? Are you, health of all the limbs, stuff like that, right? So,
disclaimer, I am not a programmer. I have very little knowledge of coding. However, to me it seems like Chris wants to have everything in his game so you can brag, look, we have even this. Does this game really need 800 serialized variables just for one character? And does this game really need so many missiles, so many shotguns, so many shield generators, so many coolers, and most of them are doing exactly the same thing or close anyway? Why don't you streamline your game, Chris? Same with PS. Chris seems to be very proud of his persistent entity streaming, something no other multiplayer game does. Just so that Chris can throw a cup into the woods and find it 4 weeks later. Did you ever ask yourself the question why? Why no other multiplayer game does this, Chris? Maybe because this can't be managed with acceptable performance, interaction layers, and two things?
the programmers between patches, they just changed that. I removed this one, and I put a new one in, and then because some of those variables, it doesn't matter if it changes.
Yeah.
Some of them matter, right? If you change that, like it's a different shape, it loads a different CGA model, whatever, right? So that's the big problem about how we need to forward migrate, is we need to do this at the very low level. So currently, our network team and our online teams are working at this mechanism to be able to differentiate the important from the important SVs, the serialized variables on components. So that's all across all components in the game. There's over 1,500, 2,000 components, individual code components in the game. So, you know, for example, I don't need to know if you're crouched when I stow you in your inventory, right? I don't need to know that, right? But I need to know that when we're running and you're crouched, right? So we differentiate the two, and then we have a mechanism to migrate the data format from one to the other. When we get that functionality in and reliable, what that means is that we will just keep the database. And that is huge, because now that means there's no longer a process between patches that transfers stuff or moves it around or recomputes things. It's the same database. We're just moving its version forward on demand.
This all sounds very good, but I have to ask, shouldn't this have been done much earlier? The year 14, CIG is at over $1 billion in funding, and now they seem to start at such basic things that should be in the game much, much earlier. Star Citizen is one of the worst managed game projects in history of gaming, and I don't blame the devs. I don't even blame Benoît. I blame the very top management, Chris and his cronies.
It's social.
Yeah.
It's social. The ability to group with people, the ability to communicate with people, the ability not to communicate with people, the ability to just be like, oh, hey, that's a bad person. That's a bad person with bad thoughts and bad intentions, and boop, boop, and kick them into the pit from 300.
Sure.
And whatnot. Never to see or hear from that person again.
Right.
All the tools for joining up. Finally, people have been creating and managing orgs on our website since 2013.
Yeah, 13.
And this is 2026, and those orgs still not in game.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm saying this in my videos. This almost looks like Chris doesn't want to make an MMO. We don't even have something like LFG channels looking for groups. We don't even have player trading yet. If you want to trade with another player, you have to drop the item to the ground, hope it doesn't glitch through the ground, and hope the other guy actually pays. Unbelievable for year 14.
A social universe, right? The last panel that we did at CitizenCon. That outlines the vision of what we want to do with social.
Isn't it great? CIG has a vision of what they want to do with social. No, this is not a small studio just starting, having no money.
Right now, we have completely formed the social strike team, and so a bit like the heroes team, right? The social strike team, its only mission is to execute this plan.
CIG in year 14 has formed a social strike team.
So we're working on this right now, actively.
For a 2026 release?
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's like you mentioned, it's kind of urgent at this point that we do something there. Okay, now orgs are in the game. That's the first.
That's the whole name, and then the org. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Like.
How about org ships in org colors? Oh yes, Chris learned he can make way too much money with very easy done paint jobs. Most are just color swaps.
Obviously, we don't at CIG don't have a large moderation team in game.
This was a nice understatement, Benoît. No, CIG doesn't have anyone moderating in-game. Star Citizen doesn't even have game masters like most other MMOs have. For example, your character gets stuck, you can contact a game master, and game master can unstuck you. We all have done this many times in other MMOs.
But the inventory work is going really well. I mean, some of the people have been reposting screens recently on the original concept, right? That was shown. I mean, it's starting to look like that, so that's really good.
When does that go into tech preview?
We're hoping very soon, because like at this point, every version that I've seen is fully functional.
I would like to remind everyone that we already had an inventory rework in 2021. Yeah, again, reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks. Chris seems to think this doesn't cost time and money. Yes, it does, Chris.
Instancing is basically an additional system on top of server meshing, which allows us to take an area of space and give it to a server in the mesh to manage, right? Doesn't matter which one.
I am not opposed to instancing. This can work very well. For example, in Dark Age of Camural back in the days, we got instancing of dungeons and it worked very well. However, Star Citizen still needs to be played with acceptable interaction delays and do things in the open world.
And the first instance content will be Siege of Orison. We announced that.
Redux. And, I'm going to go Chris Roberts here, but Chris, always insisted on, taking the difficult approaches to build certain features, right?
Mm-hmm.
I agree that Chris always goes for the most complicated things, like for example PS and everything physicalized. But Chris is never asking himself, why do other games not do this? Maybe because it's not possible with acceptable performance. And it's not like Chris always goes for the most complicated things that makes the most sense. For example, cameras are not in the eye sockets of the players. Cameras are behind the ears. This is why when you're lying on the bed, half the screen is blocked by your armor. This also means in cockpit view, for example Plate and Warden, you see a big fat bar right in your face that you wouldn't even notice if the camera would be in the eye socket of the player. This is nothing special, this is just one of the many heavy armor suits. When you look down, your vision is blocked by your armor, which wouldn't happen with camera in eye socket. It also can make it very hard to pick up items that are lying on the ground. In this case, luckily there was an F prompt.
Is the inventory rework, is it just UI, or will it actually apply any additional functionality to stacking and unstacking and stuff like that?
There's additional functionality, but obviously the big of the groundwork was the UI, usability. But if you look at the mock-ups, right, you also see equipment. So it's not just inventory, it's actually equipment plus assignment on your character. So the paper doll approach.
Yes, paper doll. Almost every other game uses a paper doll for inventory management. But Chris doesn't seem to want to go that route, but now finally we are getting a paper doll. Wow, this took you long enough.
Let's talk about the economy exploits.
Sure.
What's happening?
We have a strike team on this at the moment, right, looking at all these different things.
Every time Benoît says they have a strike team, a hero team, a special team working on something, take a drink.
Historically, exploits have always taken a lower priority to ongoing development, right?
I'm going to jump in. You're tense switching between past and present here. I want to be clear. You're talking about the past right now.
The past.
He's tense switching a couple of times. It makes it sound like he's talking about today.
No.
It's like this.
In the
We're
past,
talking about the
yes.
past, guys.
So in the past, right, exploits would fall. There'd be bugs like any other, right? Depending on the severity, sometimes they got escalated, but we didn't have a process for this. So now the conversation is about when we do get an exploit report, how do we deal with it? Like, how do we escalate it? How do we respond to it? How do we deal with it, right? And so for the current ongoing exploits that we know about that have a damaging effect on the economy, currently we're dealing with them the same way we've dealt with the other hero strike teams. And so we're looking at each one of them and confirming the fixes. So is the battle cruiser actually happening? Is that thing actually going?
Yes, the battle cruiser is coming.
Battlecruiser is a stretch goal, August 2013, $70 million. Star Citizen will feature an additional flyable ship, the Battlecruiser. So they have to do this because it's the stretch goals, but we have many other things in the stretch goals that are still not in the game. Yeah, I'm not so sure. I guess Battlecruiser will be at least $5,000, maybe $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. It will be a limited hull, and it will sell like hot cakes.
Genesis.
Okay.
And Nix 1, right?
Okay.
We've kind of conjoined development on 3 separate things in order to ship the best Nix experience that we could offer, right? And so obviously Genesis is part of that, and the Planet Tech that's behind it. But also the Starchitect work.
I lost track if Genesis is Planet Tech V5, V6, V7, V8 or whatever. What CRT showed us at CitizenCon looked very pretty, it looked fantastic, but those were pre-rendered videos. I'm kind of skeptical we will see this in a game. If CRT can do this, fantastic, but I suppose we are getting a much watered down version. And now that we have Genesis, does CRT have to redo all the other planets too? Reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks of reworks.
We talked about spawn in the hangar, right? And so to build spawning hangar, we had to build a new workflow, right? To be able to determine, can we spawn you there? Is there a requirement for you spawning there, right? So the requirement in the case of spawn in hangar is your hangar spawned, right? That's also extended to ships, right? But what we're trying to achieve, now I'm not promising this anywhere, but is spawn in place. And so we're trying to extend that workflow for spawn in place so that, you know, you just log in the game and you spawn where you were. And so that's something that we're passionate about and we're trying to get in there. So yeah.
This is pretty much standard for MMOs. You log in where you logged out. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
I love lamp.
Hey, you're still here. You might want to join me on Twitter or on Blue Sky.